Hello everyone, my name is Elena, aka Mintimito, and if you're new here, welcome, and if you're not, welcome back to my channel where I do fun art challenges and talk about whatever's on my mind. And today I wanted to talk about the practice of keeping a sketchbook. Specifically, I wanted to talk about a trend I've seen in recent years on social media, mainly YouTube, but other places as well, where people intentionally make their sketchbooks really full, colorful, and quote-unquote aesthetic. And I find this fascinating. For me, growing up, I always saw my sketchbook as basically my art journal. I never intended to really share it with people for the most part, and it was full of incomplete drawings, scribbled out notes, streams of consciousness, mind maps, thumbnails, and occasionally a nice drawing here and there. But for the most part, my sketchbook was always just a place for dumping out ideas, doing art studies, doodling things I was interested in, usually fan art of a show or a movie I just watched. And in general, the pages just weren't really full at all. But on YouTube, I've seen countless videos giving tips for how to make your sketchbook full and beautiful. And then on top of that, there are also tons of sketchbook tour videos where every page is full of stunning, colorful artwork using tons of different mediums, maybe even some collage elements, and most importantly, just really filling up the whole page. Just truly gorgeous spreads, and I was like, I want to have an aesthetic sketchbook too, I feel left out. And so I started one. But before I get into sharing that process and all the reasons why I wanted to jump on this little bandwagon, I'd like to include a few big disclaimers / notes about this whole aesthetic sketchbook practice trend. Generally speaking, I think most of an artist's sketchbooking should be all about freely, loosely, just drawing on a page, taking your creativity out of your head and into a physical space. Not for the purpose of sharing with others, though there's nothing wrong with doing that too, but it should primarily be for your own benefit, your own needs, your own creative expression, which means it will inevitably be messy and unappealing at times. Most of the time, probably. I watched this amazing video by Leanne's Art Lab where they discussed the importance of keeping a messy sketchbook so that you can fully express your creativity without limiting yourself or feeling perfectionistic about your art process. And for anyone who may be feeling scared to even draw in a sketchbook, I highly recommend checking out this video, which will be linked in the description along with any other videos or artists that I mentioned in this video. Another video I saw a while ago by one of my favorite creators, Mu Tripled, discusses this issue as well, but goes more in depth about why it's important to have what she calls a book, a place for loose, messy drawings and notes and dumping everything in your head onto a page without limits. So again, I highly recommend that video to anyone who feels intimidated by this aesthetic sketchbook trend. And I completely agree with the points these creators discussed in their videos. A sketchbook should be all about your personal freedom and creativity, and you shouldn't feel like you're making it for others. It should serve you, your creative goals, whether it's warming up, taking notes, exploring new ideas, or just doodling because it's fun and relaxing. All of that is so important to the creative process, so it makes me sad to hear that there are artists who pressure themselves to make their sketchbooks beautiful for an audience, because that shouldn't be the main goal. Learning about this trend made me realize that young artists who grew up with social media probably feel so much pressure to only make beautiful, perfect things so they can share it online, and that sucks. I didn't start an art account on Instagram until I was in college. I can't imagine what it's like to have that kind of culture in your face since childhood. So to all my younger artists out there, or heck, anyone of any age who feels like they need to have beautiful sketchbooks and are afraid to even attempt drawing on the first page of a new sketchbook, I'm telling you this now, it is totally okay to be nervous, and it's okay to want to make beautiful things in a sketchbook, but please, please, please give yourself another space to be unfiltered and unlimited with your ideas. You are not a machine, you are a complex human being, and you need to be able to let out that messy, imperfect side of yourself. Otherwise, you're stifling your own ability to tap into your authentic voice as an artist. And you hear me say all that, but then you look at the title of the video and what I said earlier, and you're like, okay, well, if we're supposed to be messy in our sketchbooks, then why are you starting an aesthetic one? Well, I'll tell you. Like I said, I personally have always had messy sketchbooks, so as someone who already works in sketchbooks in a very messy, unstructured way, and I will continue to do so, my favorite sketchbook right now is this tiny little notebook where the pages are all falling out and it's just a bunch of scribbly notes and the occasional doodle here and there. I do find the concept of making a sketchbook full of different mediums and colorful spreads very appealing for my own artistic goals. Which brings me to the creation of this new sketchbook that I've started and why this practice could be beneficial depending on what your goals are. So sit back, relax, feel free to grab your sketchbook or tablet and draw along with me, and let's get into it. Welcome to the time-lapse, everyone. As you can tell, this is a bit different from my other videos, because usually I do digital art time-lapses, but this time you get to see the grand hand reveal and see some live-action footage. Is that the right way to say that? Live action? Please, this isn't a movie, whatever. But anyways, the first thing on my list of to-dos for this aesthetic sketchbook was to obtain a sketchbook. I knew I wanted one with paper that was hefty and durable enough to take multiple mediums, and I also didn't want it to be too big because I wanted to be able to fill the pages as much as possible, and a larger sketchbook would have been pretty difficult to do since I've never done this type of practice in previous sketchbooks, like I said. While I could have bought a mixed media sketchbook that would have served this purpose, I decided to actually make the book myself. I have so many large watercolor sheets left over from college, and I figured they would make a great surface for the mediums I wanted to use. I followed a tutorial by Mr. Otter Art Studio and stitched together my own custom watercolor sketchbook, although I'll be doing more than just watercolor in this. At the end, I added my geometric cherry blossom logo thing to the cover. I wanted to decorate it more fully, but the paper type I used for the cover wasn't very durable. And while I did have to restart the stitching a couple times throughout, this overall was such a fun process. I don't consider myself a crafty person, even though I like to draw and paint, but being crafty is something else. So working with my hands in this way was really refreshing, and I recommend trying it out, especially if, like me, you have extra sheets of watercolor paper lying around. And that brings me nicely to my first point for why I wanted to start an aesthetic sketchbook. So reason number one, I wanted to use up old art supplies and stationery. This is a very practical reason for starting this kind of sketchbook, but it was a huge driver for why I wanted to do it. I've collected a lot of art supplies over the years, and as an adult, I moved primarily to digital art, so most of these supplies have just been collecting dust. I'm very averse to letting things go to waste, so I've been wanting to come up with some kind of project that would force me to intentionally use up all of these old supplies, especially the old, cheaper stuff. Just because they're not that good doesn't mean they should just get dumped in the garbage. So this aesthetic sketchbook is the perfect opportunity for that, since the goal would be to fill up the pages as much as possible in order to create a full appearance. I would have ample opportunities to use my old markers and paints to lay down color, or even try to do full illustrations with them. And I figured it would be so much more fun and interesting than my typical sketchbook practice where I just loosely draw on various sections of each page and not use up as much of the space as I could. So that's another aspect of using up supplies. I tend to not even use up all the space available in my sketchbooks, which is such a waste of prime real estate. So this sketchbook would be a way to challenge me to use up all the space and have fun with it. In addition, this sketchbook would also be a place where I could use up stickers from my enormous collection that's been going nowhere. I tend to be really precious about the stickers I have, and I don't know why. They're made to be stuck onto things, so I gotta be sticking them on things. This is something I've seen a lot of artists do in their sketchbook, and I can't believe I haven't done it really before. If there's some blank space on a sketchbook page that I want to fill up, I can just put a sticker there. Or if I make a mistake on a painting and I want to cover it up, I can put a sticker there. Another idea I'd like to incorporate is that if I'm wanting to work in this sketchbook but I can't think of any ideas, I could just grab a sticker from my big collection and draw things related to it on that spread. And there are other tools I'd love to use in here too, like my washi tapes and little items from events or traveling that I tend to collect and do nothing with, so I figured it's time to do something with them that's actually meaningful to me. And before I get to my next reason for making this aesthetic sketchbook, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I decided to draw on the first page. So I'll be honest, originally it was a completely different drawing. I started of some flowers, but I wasn't really having fun working on it, so I painted over it with a layer of gouache and just started drawing Pearl from Steven Universe instead. I layered on some colors in gouache indicating where Pearl would be, and then I realized I was probably doing way too thick of layers because the paint just kept reactivating as I tried to add more, so I figured I should probably stop with the gouache, and this was frustrating at the time, but that's what's fun about traditional art. It's how these inconveniences come up and you have to problem solve anyways. So facing this issue, I ended up going back to my roots and used my Prismacolors to finish up the piece, and it was so much fun. I haven't used them in so long, but the muscle memory was still there. I don't know if you guys know, but I used to be a big Prismacolor girly. If I find any photos, I'll put them on the screen, but yeah, that used to be my main medium before I started doing digital art. I love how buttery Prismacolors can get when you really layer them on, so I was having a blast with this. In the end, I was really happy with how it turned out. Sadly, you'll see that my phone died towards the end, so you don't get to see me add the extra details with gouache and marker. But all this talk about different mediums and traditional art actually brings me to my next reason that I wanted to start the sketchbook. The second reason I wanted to start an aesthetic sketchbook was to force myself to explore different traditional art mediums. And this is important to me for a lot of reasons. For starters, I used to primarily do traditional art growing up, which I think most people can relate to. Even in today's age of advanced technology, we usually don't start our drawing journey with a pen tablet. Getting in touch with the things I loved as a child has always served me well. I mean, my channel's grown in audience because I decided to get back into my middle school obsession with Sonic the Hedgehog, an obsession that never ended, TBH, but you know. So I've really been wanting to get back into the mediums I loved before I started digital art. Those mediums being pencil, ink, and my babies, like I already said, the Prismacolor pencils. I used to really love working with them and they were my main medium, so it makes me sad that I haven't really used them in years, which is why this drawing was just so fun to work on. Other mediums I definitely want to use are watercolor and gouache, maybe even acrylic gouache. With watercolor, I started using it in college, and while it was a tough learning curve, I ended up really loving it. It was a medium that forced me to let go of my perfectionism because it can be so unpredictable, but that's exactly what makes watercolor pieces so gorgeous and mesmerizing, and all the more impressive when an artist is able to make something really beautiful and appealing with them. And with gouache, I basically have no history with it. I've tried using them in the past with no luck, and to be fair, the set that I have is really old and it was like the cheapest brand available, but also I think it's just a really hard medium for me to use. But I want to get better at it. I follow so many artists who use it and there's just something so special about how it looks that really speaks to me and it makes me want to understand it. Every time I see a beautiful gouache piece online, I just get this itch, like I really want to be good at it. And so I definitely want to do some gouache studies in here and try painting characters and scenes with it. That is probably going to be the scariest thing that I do for this sketchbook, but I'm also really excited about it. I did recently buy a set of the super fancy high quality Holbein? You know what? Holbein? Maybe it's Holbein. I've never actually said it out loud. I'm gonna say Holbein gouache that I've heard so much about, but before I even open those, I definitely want to use up my cheap ones so I can get some experience and familiarity before I dive into the good stuff. And like I mentioned earlier, I did technically use gouache in this piece, but I feel like it barely counts. I just used Prismacolors on top of it. I did end up really liking the effect though, so maybe this is a technique that I could use for various illustrations in here, who knows? And finally, my last reason for wanting to start an aesthetic sketchbook is to help me get some clarity on my artistic voice, which probably sounds vague and weird, so I will do my best to explain what I mean. Anyone who's been following me for a while knows that I'm primarily a digital artist and I love digital art. That is my main baby right now, but it can come with some bad habits that are really hard for me to break. One thing that is so difficult for me, even though every digital artist says it's bad and I try so hard not to do it, but I always do, is getting caught up in the tiny, minute details of any digital piece that I'm making. No matter how much I try to avoid it, I end up zooming in really close on my canvas, smoothing out the tiniest discrepancies, adding the smallest details that aren't even visible from a normal distance, and hey, maybe doing that kind of detail work, maybe it's your jam, and that's fine. But for me, I've always seen it as something that holds me back. I get so obsessed with the little things that the overall picture just doesn't end up the way that I want it to, and I love when digital paintings have this immediate clarity that's almost to the point of realism, but when you look at it closer, you can see all the paint strokes and the textures that the artist used. Those are some of my favorite types of digital art, and yet I can never seem to step back far enough from a piece to achieve that kind of effect. That is, of course, unless it's traditional. I'm a lot better at embracing the messiness and textures of traditional art, and that makes sense. Regardless of what medium you use, it's always more unforgiving than digital art, because when you're working digitally, you have layers and the undo button, the ability to zoom in to the tiniest pixel. But in traditional art, there are inherent imperfections and details that show the human touch, and I love how it looks. I'm hoping that by diving back into traditional art, I'll be able to practice this muscle more of just laying down marks and accepting them as is. And this is really important to me because I've noticed in the past few years, especially, I've been second guessing myself a lot with my art. I have this habit where I will start a piece and get really far on it and then completely start over, and I'm never mad about doing that, but I feel like this habit of second guessing myself, constantly restarting. It's just really exhausting. I want to build up a better, how should I say this? A stronger sense of intuition and more confidence and clarity in what I'm doing and the process that I go about creating things. I feel like I'm just all over the place lately, and I feel like with traditional art, since it is more unforgiving, I have to just make decisions and be okay with it and problem solve as I go along in ways that digital art allows me to be way too flexible with, if that makes sense. I've also recently been watching Spilled Ink, which is a collab channel run by Emi Richu and Didus, and the whole channel is basically just these two digital artists trying to get into traditional art. And it's so fun, I highly recommend their channel, but watching them work with traditional mediums that they aren't used to has inspired me, and in a recent video they even talked about how doing traditional art has been helping to inform their digital art process, so that's what I'm hoping to achieve as well. Digital art is so free and infinite, which is its best and worst feature in my opinion. I hope that getting back into traditional mediums and challenging myself will help me to let go of the perfectionism I experience when working digitally and just help me to grow as an artist in general. And the last thing I'd like to say is, while I have been calling this the aesthetic sketchbook the whole video, I do want to clarify that by aesthetic, I mainly mean just full of color, full of mediums, full of art covering the whole space. Just because I'm intending for the art to look nice too, doesn't mean that it will. Like I said, I'm planning to do some gouache studies in here, and as of now, I'm not good at gouache, so some of these pages probably will not turn out that cute. But my hope is that I will make good use of all my traditional art supplies, expand my skills, and fuel my creativity in a new way, and I'm very, very excited about it. Thanks so much for watching. I had so much fun stitching together this sketchbook and working on the first page, and I hope that you enjoyed watching the process and listening to me ramble about how I'm planning to use this sketchbook in the future. I certainly hope to share more of the work I do in here in future videos, so let me know if that's something you'd be excited to see. I'll probably do it anyways, but if I see that people are actually interested, it would help me just feel more confident about it. I know this is quite different from my usual digital art videos, which aren't going anywhere, so don't worry. Let me know in the comments if there are any traditional art YouTubers that you follow or people who have really nice sketchbook tours. I would love to check them out so I can get some inspiration and maybe learn a thing or two, especially if it's about gouache, because I need help. And if you like doing traditional art, let me know what your favorite mediums are and what you'd like to improve on. As always, all my important links like my tools, socials, BLM art fundraiser, and so on will be down below in the description. And if you're interested in tipping or commissioning me, I do have a Ko-fi page where you can do that. Either is very much appreciated. And take care of yourselves, keep creating, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!